Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar on why HR needs to think like marketers. With us today we've got Andrew Porter, Head of Talent Engagement Europe at Diageo, and Chris Chesterman, Talent Acquisition European Leader for IBM. I would say that if you have any questions, then please do send them through. We'll be monitoring throughout the entire webinar. We'll try and find an appropriate time to ask them. If not, we might leave them to specific gaps or towards the end. But as the webinar goes on, please just send the questions through as and when. Without further ado, Chris, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you very much. So hello everybody, my name is Chris Chesterman from IBM, and firstly I wanted to just thank Andrew for taking the time to share the Diageo story with us today. I think it's a great story, and one that's taken place over 7 or 8 years now, that there's been a relationship and Diageo using our talent acquisition technology. I think the topic and the subject matter of marketing and recruiters becoming marketeers is incredibly relevant with the evolution we're seeing in the talent management space and talent acquisition in particular. And this is no better represented than the journey that IBM itself is going on, where we're looking to take the core foundation of talent acquisition being cemented around process automation and efficiency, and then driving alongside that exceptional candidate experiences, and looking at delivering experiences which resonate with candidates as if they were consumers, but equally so then looking at recruiters and managers and giving them the tools to be able to market out to candidates using consumer-grade marketing tools to portray your brand and interact and build rich pipelines of talent with candidate relationship management tools. But equally so, looking and asking the question, why shouldn't recruiters and hiring managers equally have access to web analytic technologies to understand the behaviours of our candidates as they go from being a passive candidate through as an applicant and as a candidate and beyond. And so ultimately, we very much and wholeheartedly believe in the concept of recruitment as marketing, and really giving our recruiters and our hiring managers access to market-leading tools to make more strategic investments and gain more insight in those people that will hopefully drive your organisations forward. And from what I've seen from Andrew's story that he's about to tell, I think he's a firm believer in that journey, and I look forward to hearing it along with you guys. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Andrew here. Thanks, Chris, for that very kind introduction. What I want to try and do this afternoon is give you that sense of linking what Chris has just talked about in terms of recruitment and marketing coming closer together, and I guess bringing that to life by telling the story that of the journey that we've been on at Diageo. And it just as a real moment of relevance, I was at a LinkedIn event, or an event hosted by LinkedIn yesterday, and this again came up as a major topic. I was with 25 industry peers looking at a range of subjects, and this concept of recruiters as marketeers, the technology that we need to support that particular ambition is resonating right the way across different industry sectors, different industry groups, and across Europe as well. So it's really great to have this opportunity to kind of, I guess, share the journey that we've been on, and perhaps in doing that, get some interesting insights and thoughts and questions perhaps towards the end around how that's resonating with those of you on the call today. And I do think that also raises the issue of how we as practitioners and leaders within talent acquisition begin to think about the capabilities and how we execute and deliver what we do in a very different way as we go forward. So let's get into the meat of today. Three really kind of core topics that I want to try and cover in the next 30 to 35 minutes with you. The first one is just to kind of give you an insight into where our journey started and where we are on it, and so explain to you what we call talent engagement as opposed to resourcing or talent acquisition, and why that's the case. I also want to cover the development of our employer brand and how we see that as a really critical part of this story that I want to tell you, and where we are with that, and how adopting and working with our marketing colleagues within Diageo has actually really changed how we think about the candidate journey, the candidate experience, our employer brand, and how we've brought that together with our consumer brands as well. And then finally, what I want to do is talk a little bit about a journey that we are beginning, which is around candidate experience. For any of you who may have been to the REC's annual event either last year or this year will know that candidate experience is often called out as one of the key things that is so poor in our industry, and that there's a huge amount of work to be done in this space. But I guess where I want to end up with is talking to you about my fundamental belief that if we have a great employer brand combined with a great candidate experience, actually that is what gives us talent acquisition squared, in the sense that the sum of those two parts is far greater than just adding them together. It becomes exponential in terms of the benefit. So let's get into the first one of those areas. So just giving you a little bit of an overview around what talent engagement actually is. So a couple of years ago, the business decided that they wanted to take a very different approach to resourcing, and effectively we became a global capability rather than a regional, or even in some cases a market capability. And that meant that we had to drive a very different set of ways of working, ways of thinking, and it allowed us scale for the first time rather than allowing everything to be operated in silos, as I say, at a market or regional level. So we had to have something that allowed us to be able to come together under, and I guess what I'm sharing with you here is the way that we've interpreted that ambition within my region in Europe. So it really simply, which allows our team to have kind of resonance and understanding about what our mission and purpose is. So we form around what, the why, what's our purpose, and very much that's connected to the business ambition, which is to have talent front and center of what we do and how we operate, because we believe that everybody has potential. We believe that talent is a critical part of being able to drive the business forward by always hiring and recruiting the very best people that we can. But equally, there's a flip side for candidates, which is by having that approach, we also believe that we can unlock their career possibilities and the potential that they have to grow within themselves and for the benefit of the business. The next layer down is, how do we do that? How do we organize ourselves around our strategic priorities? And for us within talent engagement, that's really five things that you can see up on the screen. So it's about being really passionate about our brand, and this is the major connection into the kind of the session today. How do we bring that to life? What do we use to bring that to life? And how do we engage and talk to our candidates about our brand and the passion that we have for it? Clearly, we want to engage the best talent, and that's kind of almost the fundamental foundation stone. And then clear and honest leadership is really centered around making sure that we are in the business primarily really valued and trusted advisors, making sure that we can demonstrate real value in terms of our knowledge of what we do, how we do it, the industry, the market, wherever that may be, wherever we operate. And that clearly drops into, as I've said there, trusted advisors. And then the final part is the creating end-to-end talent solutions. And I guess this is quite a nice link into Chris's introduction in terms of technology as well, which is that as talent engagement and as Diageo, we don't believe that recruitment or resourcing or talent acquisition, whatever name you go under, is a transactional activity. It is not a, as I often call it, hire, die, repeat. So it's not this old-fashioned way of thinking about open a rec, fill it, move on and keep doing that. Very much for Diageo, this is a shift in belief that we want to recruit the best talent, and then we actually hire those people for a long and valuable career, both for themselves and for us within the business. So that's what I mean about creating end-to-end talent solutions. And I think from a technology point of view, that's something that we need to think about as we go forward over the next few years, about not having disjointed technology, but technology that actually joins up in some way. And then the what is how we show up in terms of how we measure and evaluate our performance. And I won't drain those slides or those bullet points, other than to say that really what I want to focus in on today, and how this connects into what we do, is about being an employer of choice and giving a brilliant candidate experience. So that's really, those are the two areas of our ambition that I kind of want to focus in on in the rest of this presentation. So I want to tell you a story, as an old comedian once said. I really want to tell you two stories. I want to tell you the story of the development of our employer brand, and then I also want to go on and tell you about the new story that we're just starting, which is thinking about how we use candidate experience to really sort of measure the impact that our brand has when we interact with our candidates. But just as a starting point, I think we have to remember that in an age of talent now being really highly mobile and to some extent largely passive, you can't ignore that a great employer brand both attracts and retains talent that you need to be successful as an organisation in a competitive marketplace. And that kind of pulls back to the point that I mentioned a moment ago, that this isn't just about hiring great talent, it's about making sure that we hire great talent who's going to stay with us, who we can give a rewarding and fulfilling career to. And additionally, I think the other layer of this is operating in an increasingly digital environment means that candidates are accessed faster. There are many more ways than ever before where people can see roles, they can see information about organisations, and we have to be very conscious that the operating context that we now work in has changed quite dramatically, and if anything is going to continue at that pace or even faster. And for that reason, really, I don't think any of us can afford to ignore the impact of the digital world and the impact that's going to have on how we engage and build a relationship with talent going forward. And that has to be a key area of interest for every organisation. I think there's also another flip side to this, which is there's a need to increasingly engage your own people within your organisation in the brand and making that sort of powerful and authentic. You know, your audience outside the business actually want to see what it's like to work in an organisation. So if you don't have engaged, really included people who are already with you, that actually makes it very difficult to tell the story of why somebody should come and work for you. So that whole thing of how we engage talent, as well as how we keep talent engaged within the business, have been brought much, much more closely together. And for that reason, it isn't just about having an employer brand. What is so critical, and this is what we've really worked very hard on, is that your brand is authentic. It cannot show up in a different way when somebody experiences it to how you talk about it. And that's why, and you'll begin to see the connections why I believe passionately about candidate experience as well. So I think, you know, to build a successful employer brand, we need to collaborate, and I think what I'm going to take you through is a really good demonstration of how HR or recruitment has actually collaborated with our colleagues from marketing. And I think we just have to accept that whilst we are the experts in talent acquisition, we don't know it all, and also that other people have really valuable insight and value to add in terms of how we can build out a very different approach. And that's really what I want to focus in on and tell you about. So much like we had a talent acquisition why, this is talking about the employer brand. And I think if we set that in context, and it picks up on my last point about digital, the context here is that we're in a market where there are a lot more sort of digital natives. The millennial mindset, and I use that really deliberately, I'm not talking about millennials per se, but the millennial mindset describes people who have picked up on the digital environment. How many of us are never more than an arm's length away from our mobile phone? That alone drives a different set of behaviours. People around the room just pushing their phones away from me now. But in terms of how do we interact with each other? We interact through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, through Snapchat. All of these things 5 years ago weren't part of our everyday language. So those of us who adapt to that new environment is what I'm talking about in terms of millennial mindset, rather than the millennial generation, which I think sometimes can get a little bit overused. It's also very much a candidate market because information about organisations is so much more accessible. The candidate has the power, and no more so than now. When we sort of shift very much into a candidate-led market as opposed to an employer-led market. And talent for most organisations is the differentiating factor for any organisation to win in their space, and because it drives value to the business through accelerating development of the organisation. So we just talk through kind of how our employer brand fits together. So there you can see at the top that it's about attracting and retaining the talent we need for the future, and that's very much rooted in our performance ambition as an organisation. So this is part of what we sort of publicly state as being our key objectives to making the organisation succeed. But in terms of the elements of that, strengthening the pipeline is all about having a constant presence. It's not about, oh, we need more of these, or oh, we need more of those. It's actually about constantly engaging, constantly being part of people's consciousness and awareness. And I'll talk to you a little bit about and show you at what we call our always on campaign, and that's deliberately there to strengthen our talent pipeline. In terms of changing our capability, there's some really good examples of that in our own organisation, and I'm sure that will resonate with those of you on the call today. Things like business intelligence, analytics, digital that I've already mentioned. These are things that are starting to come through, and we have to have an employer brand that is able to react and cope with those new challenges as they come down the line. You can't keep reinventing your employer brand just to address a different market. And then improving our organisational effectiveness. So this is about, as strategy changes, having a brand that is flexible enough to be able to support that, not to change with it, but to support it. And a good example, and one that I'll talk you through in a little bit, is we suddenly decided to, or not suddenly, but we certainly decided to create a new shared services centre in India, and we've had to actually flex our global employer brand to fit that particular project. And then finally, the brand has to constantly reinforce our culture, and I've already spoken about that in terms of authenticity, and that will be a word that comes up again in a moment. But we have to serve up content that drives an interest, drives a curiosity about our organisation, and starts to create the foundations of people wanting to be, whether they're inside the business or actually potential candidates, being brand advocates. And ultimately that helps our existing people and new people joining us become real ambassadors for our organisation when we talk about why should they come and work for Diageo. The benefits are those that are up on the slide. So, it's around amplifying our voice in the market to create reach and engagement about our organisation and about our consumer brands. And as you will see in a moment, what we have done is very fundamentally not try to create a separate employer brand, but actually created an employer brand that absolutely embraces all of our consumer brands, but also amplifies why Diageo. It creates a profile in the market that allows us to access top talent. If people know about you, if people are engaged with videos, live content, then clearly that means that they're going to be more likely to talk to you when you reach out to them. And employees also are a really critical part of this, which is they need to have a sense of pride and engagement around who they work for, so that it makes them feel sort of comfortable and enthusiastic to support the brand with their networks and with their contacts. And no better kind of example of that, I guess, as referrals. And that is definitely something that is on our agenda. And in fact, in terms of kind of the IBM connection, looking at how we use the social referral tool, for example, to really sort of exploit that opportunity. So I just really wanted to briefly take what I've just said to you and put it into a really simple framework. So at one level, we have an organising framework which is called Brand Diageo, and this is our overarching strategic framework that drives engagement, influence, advocacy, and it kind of gives us a description of our purpose, our roots, character and values. So this is the thing that really drives and wraps around everything that we do. But the EVP and employer brand are part of this, so they're not separate, they are actually part of the overall framework. So within the Brand Diageo framework, we then have the employee value proposition, which we see as the employee perspective. So this describes what it's like to be part of the organisation. It's the employee perspective, as I said. Here we describe, what our how we're different from other organisations. It's our unique character, and we can do that through giving really clear descriptions of our culture, people, rewards, benefit, and environment. And then the final element is our employer brand, and that's very much the external perspective of our shop window to talent. So this is the manifestation of the corporate brand that potential talent and candidates see, and we're now, as we go through this, you'll understand the connection with we want them to experience that as well. The purpose is uniquely and distinctively different to engage and attract interest towards Diageo. And this is where I think we've made a real shift from being reactive and transactional to beginning to adopt this recruiters as marketeers approach by developing an interest and a followership approach rather than a very reactive one. So more people than ever are aware of Diageo, and I'll explain to you in a second just how we've done that in terms of our relationship with LinkedIn. But I think what that all allows us to do is become authentically Diageo. So what you see, what you experience, what you feel, it becomes what you are going to experience by joining us. So that's how our sort of framework works. In terms of routes to market, we've been very deliberate in taking a very gradual approach about how we deploy our brand. And in 2015, we chose to focus on sort of 5 key channels to market. So LinkedIn, Yammer, which is our internal network, Mosaic, which is our internal intranet site, Diageo Careers, and YouTube. And if I'm going to talk about one of those, and I will, I think it's the relationship that we've built with LinkedIn over the last 2 years particularly, where, as you can see from the graph on the right, back in 2014 we had around 80,000 followers. By early 2015 we had 250,000 followers, and we are about to hit 500,000 followers on LinkedIn. And without a shadow of a doubt, that relationship with LinkedIn, what we have done, how we've built the solution, has absolutely powered getting our message and our collateral and our brand much more out into the broader marketplace. And that we do that at a global level, but we also do that by serving up content that is specifically geared towards individual regions and markets as well. This year we've moved towards working with Indeed, Glassdoor, and Instagram and Twitter, and so that's a natural expansion of the channels, the digital channels that we've tended to use, and this year focus much more on the outward-facing channels as opposed to the internal channels. The one that, and probably events like this is a good example of, we've begun to sort of do much more PR around what we've been doing and telling our story. So, all of these kinds of events as well talk to, what we do, how we do it, and begin to engage people in Diageo as an organisation.
Laura's just come in with a question, just asked about the increase in followers on LinkedIn. How did you sort of improve that?
So great question, Laura. Thank you. So we've done it two ways. One is by sponsored ads and content. So paid for advertising on LinkedIn, which has been very targeted. That's driven our number of followers up significantly. The other way is just by becoming much more engaging as a career site. So don't for 1 minute think that everything we've done has cost us money. It has been about organically growing our follower base as well, but by having that rich content we create and just having it there, making it real, making it timely, making it relevant to the audiences. So our careers page, for example, is set up so that if you access it, for example, from North America, you will see content for just North America. If you are looking at it from Europe, it will be just with a European view. So there is effort, and we have a global employer branding team, which sounds very grand, but it's 2 people. But it just shows you the power of what 2 people can create. Everything I'm going to show you in the next sort of 2 or 3 minutes has all been created by that team in conjunction with various, obviously, external design agencies. But all of that content, again, has been created and served up by that team. So I think that probably talks about different capabilities that if you're going to go on this journey, and I know lots of organisations do have and have had for a number of years, people who are in recruitment teams looking at social, but actually I think now this has had to be a little bit bigger for us. It's much more of the broader digital journey as well. So I hope that helps, Laura, in terms of giving you an answer to that, but it's a great question and a great build on that last slide.
There was another question from Alison actually that that asked about Facebook. Obviously on your diagram there was no mention of Facebook. Was there a reason for that? Is that a conscious decision?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is a conscious decision. It's a conscious decision driven by the organisation's view on Facebook. That's not to say that won't change, but right now that's not a medium that the company feels comfortable is the right route for us. I think that will change over time. I mean, that's just a personal view. I think some of those issues that are around Facebook will probably get reviewed, but all I can say to you is, despite not being on Facebook, we have exploded our kind of presence, particularly across YouTube as well. YouTube has been an amazingly good channel for us, and we've just done a refresh of our digital channel on YouTube as well, so it's much easier to find content. But no great state secret. It's just not a channel that we've decided to exploit at this stage. So let me move on and talk to you a little bit about just the way that we've shown up. I've talked to you a lot about the organising idea. I've talked to you about why we've done it, and I just thought it would be really nice to briefly show you sort of some of the ways that we've begun to show up. And you'll see from the next couple of slides, there is a very conscious style, both in terms of the graphics, both in terms of the language that we use. So it's a very engaging language that we use. These 3 examples are very much designed around bringing those consumer brands to life. So, for example, the cow in the top right-hand corner is about Baileys, but also if you look very closely, you can kind of see some patterning on the cow that perhaps links us to Ireland and our heritage in Ireland as well. And again, obviously, the Guinness connection is in that bottom one in terms of the future visionaries wanted. And this is very much a provocation to our candidates about what it is we're looking for in our the profile of our candidates. You know, have you got an eye for quality, future visionaries wanted? It begins to really build on, you know, our consumer brands, our culture, but also kind of really reinforcing the fact that our organisation is built on a really deep heritage of some of these brands. You know, Guinness, Johnny Walker have been around for hundreds of years, and that we're just the latest custodians of these brands. But what we want is people who want to come along and help us propel those brands into the future as well. And again, that's a neat segue, I guess, if I look at the graduate campaign. Again, what we've tried to do is reposition this. This campaign went live in 2015 to support our new global graduate program. And again, same kind of concepts, you know, look beyond the obvious, hidden meaning, very much connected with our consumer brands, because we're not ashamed of, in fact we're incredibly proud of, you know, the brands we have, what we make, how we engage with our audiences, and we want people to come and join us because of our brands, not because it's just a cool place to go and do a graduate program. You know, any senior leader within the organisation will always be asked, or will always tell the story of which identify most strongly with, and there will be a story behind that. And for me, storytelling is something that's really come to the fore as a Diageo trait, but also underpins a lot of what we do in terms of when we think about executing our global employer brand. So really no sort of voiceover particularly there with those slides. Really just wanted to kind of, I think that helps to bring to life some of the narrative that I've gone through previously, and I'm sure that Callum will, you know, throw over any questions if that provokes any thoughts from anyone.
There was one question actually that talked about sort of the measurements that we use to demonstrate the value of strengthening the employer brand, and specifically around the return on investment. So I think, you know, obviously everyone can agree that the value of employer brand is there if you're a HR professional, but sometimes it's about maybe justifying it to the other people in the company.
Yeah, another great question. So that, without a shadow of a doubt, has been a slam dunk for us in terms of kind of what we've invested versus the return. And actually, if we go back to that graph with LinkedIn, you know, that is a very simplistic graph of showing you how many followers we did have and how many we have. But actually underpinning that is, you know, super detailed ROI information and analytics behind how much we've spent and what value that's driven. And if I tell you, just you know, at the end of our financial year, which was at the end of June, my team in Europe hired just over 2,000 people. 30% of those were internal, but of the 70% that we hired externally, almost 95% of that came through direct hiring. So, you know, in terms of the value that it creates just in that one space, the ROI is proven. But actually, you know, what the bigger return on investment is, you know, our ability to now have almost 500,000 people who are actually engaged with Diageo. And we can't forget, you know, going back to this idea of recruiters as marketeers, that actually consumers are candidates and candidates are consumers. And we spend millions of pounds on consumer branding, and what we are spending in terms of the employer brand is a drop in the ocean compared to that. So, you know, I think, you know, if you work, I appreciate that some organisations don't have, you know, a consumer brand, and we were talking about that yesterday. So that correlation is less easy to prove, but for us, certainly, you know, what we've invested over the last kind of couple of years is, you know, just propelling our ability to access new and different talent in a much more engaging way. The reason I put this this current slide up on the screen was actually just to echo one of the points that I made in an earlier slide about, you know, having a sense of effectiveness in being able to deploy. So the project that I've been supporting over the last few months out in India, you know, we had nothing. This was a brand new market for us, a brand new operation, and we are literally building it as a setup and from ground up. But what we were able to do is absolutely access imagery that we've built over the last couple of years that's relevant for the market, and within literally, this was created within 7 days of not only what you see in front of you, but pop-up banners and collateral that we could then use in deploying that to assessment centres, for example. So we have this philosophy of we lead globally, so the thinking, everything that I've kind of gone through with you is given from the centre, and then it's down to the local market or region to be able to put that local twist to it so that it has resonance and applicability to the local market. So I just wanted to share that with you because I know that was a really good example of when you've invested the time in creating the framework, actually the execution to create something that's really local and really speaks to the local market is actually incredibly quick and very cost effective. So I've talked a lot about employer brand, and I'm very conscious of time, so I want to try and just get into the last part of what I promised to talk about, which is actually our new journey, which is candidate experience. And I've already flagged a couple of times about how I believe candidate experience is so integral to our employer brand and what it can deliver to us. So I just really wanted to use a couple of examples of where we've started to think very deliberately about candidate experience, and kind of it is much more than a measure. It's not just surveys are great, and actually we'd like to do more of them, and we'd like to use that technology. We'd like to use brass ring to to be able to really harness the information and the analytics that the system can give us in terms of what people think. But it has to be more than just a measure. It has to be something that our candidates experience. And so what I wanted to do is just in the last sort of 5 minutes, I guess, is to give you a couple of examples where we've deliberately thought about candidate experience around 2 projects that we've delivered over the last year, one being our Global Graduate Programme, and the second one being the new shared service centre in India that I've mentioned a couple of times. So I just thought what I'd do is just give you some context around this, and I guess the what for us is about creating an amazing experience for candidates, and I have no shame in saying that I was in a meeting with LinkedIn, and their fundamental principle around the way they engage with their members on the platform is if it's not good for the member, they don't do it. And actually that's the philosophy that we should be taking with the candidate. So to Chris's point earlier around thinking about technology and how we use that, if it's not good for the candidate, if it doesn't drive the candidate experience in a fast, effective, efficient, great experience way, then we should just strip stuff out that doesn't help us. So I think there's going to be a challenge in the technology space about how we drive that experience and how we strip out stuff that isn't helpful, but equally put stuff that is helpful back into it. And why do we do that? Well, that creates continuity in how candidates experience our brand. If we can push all this fantastic collateral out, but if the experience when they're a candidate going through a registration process or an assessment centre, whatever it might be in process, unless it measures up to what we've given as an impression of our brand, actually there's discontinuity, and that then perhaps calls into question our authenticity as an organisation. It obviously builds brand advocacy and engagement, and this piece about storytelling I think is possibly a very underplayed part. We need to make sure that we bring to life and talk about our culture, our values, all of that really good stuff, and it has to be done in an authentic way so people feel it as well as hear it, and it creates talent ambassadors, and us internally we're seen as trusted advisors. So we just give you those two quick examples. I've really just put some pictures up just to give you something to look at while I talk at you. Let me give you some context around the project in Bangalore. The centre is going to be 1,500 people. It's starting from zero now, and over 3 years we need to bring 100 people in. it's a hugely competitive market for talent. There's 20 million people in Bangalore, and I had no appreciation that, in the last 20 years, Bangalore has gone from 2 million people to 20 million people. So the scale of the opportunity is there, but equally it's an enormously competitive marketplace. And it's a new operation for us. So we wanted to really embed the latest ways of working that we've been thinking about in other areas. So hence why we've really kind of focused in on the brand and also the candidate experience very much as part of what we've done. And we need to stand out. It's a very crowded market. We're delivering a new shared service centre. We're by no means the biggest player in that market. We have to have something that's uniquely different. And actually what we set out to do is offer people an experience that really made them go, if I get another offer in this market, I don't want to go with anyone else. I want to go with Diageo. And I think we've achieved that, and I'll explain why in a sec. The other thing was that we wanted some really innovative way of being able to hire people. So this is just about connecting the brand and the candidate experience. It's also about how we interact with those candidates and bring them through. And these photos were all taken from one of the first couple of what we call challenger-thons that we did, which was, it's not an assessment centre, it's very much a link and build event where we take people through a series of exercises, and clearly there is an assessment element to it, but it is much more experiential. It's about getting people to really understand what it's like to really work inside Diageo, and some of that feedback has definitely validated that. So what did our candidates say they enjoyed about it most? So they felt that the interviews were conducted in a unique and friendly way, which made them feel less nervous and comfortable to give their best. And so we saw the best of them. They thought the process was actually fun, and in fact somebody actually wrote, I'm not sure if it should be called an interview. The day they felt was different from any other organisation, so that really hit the mark from what we set out to achieve. And what it's done is, for a lot of people, it's made them remember us and made them think about the choice that they make when they accept an offer. And the lots of words like unique came across, and I have to say that the validation on all of this is we had amazing feedback from our candidates. We extended 78 offers across 8 assessment centres in 2 weeks, so we ran 4 assessment centres each weekend that we were there, and we had a conversion rate of just under 60% from attendance to offer. And also the diversity element was really interesting, which is, whilst we were seeing more males and females attending our assessment centre, actually the conversion was much higher in the female population, which actually kind of tapped into allowing them to be themselves and not be in perhaps such a competitive environment, but actually truly allowing them to sort of show their best. And that group did much better in terms of both their scores and the percentage of people that were converted. So we like to think that we've made something that's a real success there, and that will be unique and different in the marketplace. The last bit that I just wanted to share was our Global Graduate Programme, and this is very much built on some of those same principles. It's very much an experiential event. We take people around the world within our office. You can see a room there sort of decorated as an office in Shanghai. We make it celebratory, we make it fun, we want it to connect to our overall purpose as a business, which is celebrating life every day, everywhere. And we just want people to come and have an experience where they feel that they can be truly their best on that very important day and relax to the point where they're comfortable to show themselves off at their best. And that's very much what the final auditions, as we call them, enable people to do. And the feedback again from candidates, people got a lot from it. They thought it was a great insight into the dynamics of a corporate environment. It was great insight into a company and to see our ethos as Diageo. One person actually said they felt that the bar had been set very high for other events that they were going to, which is fantastic. It was small, it was intimate. We never had more than 16 people attend any particular event. So it gave people the the room, I guess, to show themselves off. And the feedback validated it. Great feedback from candidates, assessors, and the business. We've won 3 awards this year for our strategy and for the way we've deployed. Including one from the AGR. We had a 50-50 male-female split, which is the first time that's ever happened. And we actually significantly increased our year-on-year representation by the BAME group as well. So we're not complacent. Last year was very much our launch year, but we are introducing new things this year that will kind of improve that experience even further. So kind of coming towards the end of my time with you, I hope that what I've tried to describe over the last sort of 30-40 minutes is the importance that we see at Diageo of having a really, really strong employer brand, but candidate experience has to be part of this equation. And it seems so simple, i.e. it is a simple equation, but I think the output is that exponential impact that you have by combining these 2 elements. And I think we've got to be cognizant of that. We were talking about this at the LinkedIn event yesterday about very much having an outside-in approach, so understanding the operating environment and context that we now have and being able to make sure that our brand, our candidate experience, our technology, our solutions, our process actually deliver what we need in terms of the outside world. So that's really the purpose of the title of the presentation, which is hopefully you can understand where we are. I'm not saying that we are by any means experts in candidate experience. We have a long way to go, but in the same way that we've invested time, energy, and some degree of investment behind employer brand, certainly candidate experience is the place that we're going. And I just want to share with you one maybe last slide, which is kind of wrapping up this kind of recruiters as marketeers idea. And this is what I'm telling my team, which is your job is not your job. You come to work and you are a talent acquisition professional. In our organisation, you don't do just talent acquisition, you also do internal talent as well. But actually, I think people's role is to see potential everywhere, and that's very unique to Diageo, to ignite people's passions and ambitions, and actually, ultimately, it's to help the business win, and that's where the marketing approach of being a recruiter, I believe, comes in. So I'm going to end on that point. I do have a very short video to kind of wrap up and kind of pull together some of what I've talked about. If we don't have time, we can skip over that, Callum, but if you're happy to, we can go to the video.
I think we've got time for that. Just before we get into the video, I was going to ask if well, there was one question that Lois wanted to ask, and it was about how you agreed your EVP as she's had difficulty over in her organisation.
I guess I'm not entirely kind of sure of what that question means. How, what do we mean by agree the EVP? Is it in terms of what we're going to talk about? I mean, I think if we go back to that slide and kind of get really clear about EVP versus the employer brand, your EVP should be everything that you as an organisation want a prospective employee to know about you. It's what's unique about you. It's what you offer somebody as an opportunity to come and work for you as a business. In terms of agreeing the EVP, I'm not. That should be a relatively easy thing to do without talking to the person asking the question. I'm kind of probably need a little bit more.
I think she's expanded a little bit and said that between agreeing the current culture and your employer brand, because obviously there's various views from within her organisation in terms of maybe what that should be and things like that, I guess. So I guess it's getting everyone to agree the same thing, really.
Yeah, and I guess there's none of this comes without a lot of discussion. If it's of any help, reach out to me directly after the WebEx. More than happy to have a chat and see whether there's anything that I can sort of impart as specific insight that might help. I'm not sure that the video has actually loaded for some reason, so it may be quicker and easier just to go to any other questions.
Alison asked if you could give a brief overview of the IBM social referral tool that you mentioned earlier.
No. So I don't know whether one of my colleagues from, or one of our friends from IBM on the phone could. Being brutally honest, and I actually said this the other day, we have agreed to trial social referral, but actually I've not seen a demo of it. So let me just tell you a little bit about why we want to trial it. So for me, for everything that you've heard me talk about, referrals is an area that we just don't exploit. We currently have a really clunky way of managing that. We do manage it through Brass Ring, but we probably have made it very complex for ourselves about how we manage it. So the social referral tool is something that we see as an opportunity to, it's an easy plug and play for, it's an IBM Connector Brass Ring solution, and it has to be easier to have an organized tool to be able to support our referrals, because our referrals are knocking around the sort of 3 or 4% rate, certainly in Europe. And for me, we should be aiming for 10, 15%, particularly with the background of what we've talked about. But in terms of what the tool does, I'm really sorry, but I haven't actually seen a demo of that tool. But it's where we're heading in terms of a first stage to be able to help us with improving our referral.
I'm sure someone from IBM will be able to contact you, Alison.
It's Chris here.
Oh, there we go. Chris.
Yeah,
to someone with far greater knowledge.
No, don't worry. So just very briefly, I mean, ultimately, there's a number of innovations that IBM are introducing around this whole space, and social referral is one of them. The key thing being that, if you look at LinkedIn in particular, you are linked into a greater number of people with the same job title as you, and have a much broader sort of candidate base within LinkedIn than any other network. So we've really built it with that concept in mind. And effectively, it's a tool which will enable us to track referrals very specifically. So we will be able to see when an individual refers an opportunity to another, and equally as they do that, we'll be able to track where that came from, and the route through to hopefully a successful candidate. And ultimately then we'll be able to then in turn track that and reward people for such a referral scheme. So it will track all of those routes through, and that will work across all of the key social networks. That's a brief synopsis for now.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris, for rescuing me from that difficult question.
No problem.
It
was a great question, but it was a difficult one.
That's all the questions that have come through. Thank you for everyone that has been involved and stayed on the line. It seems like everyone has pretty much been here from the very beginning, so it's nice to see that everyone was really interested in what was said. Thank you, Andrew. It seems like there's some really innovative stuff going on at Diageo, and it was nice to explore that. And thank you, Chris, as well.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, Andrew.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.